Could a television show actually save your marriage? I mean, that's a pretty bold claim, right? Well, back in the late 1950s, one TV show promised to do just that. Today, we're diving into one of the weirdest and most forgotten experiments in TV history. And no, this wasn't some early version of reality TV. This was way back in 1959. CBS launched a daytime show called For Better or Worse, and its goal was honestly kind of radical: blend the drama of a soap opera with actual marriage counseling. They were basically broadcasting therapy sessions right into people's living rooms. So let's get into section 1, a soap with a twist. Because yeah, this really wasn't your typical daytime drama. At first glance, it might have looked like any other soap on the air. But what was going on underneath the surface was, well, it was something else entirely. Okay, so you know how a normal soap opera works, right? You've got these long, sprawling storylines that go on forever and a permanent cast you follow for years and years. For Better or Worse, completely threw that playbook out the window. Instead, it was built around these self-contained cases where each new story focused on a brand new couple and their specific problem. And these weren't just quick, one-off stories. Each case was a real deep dive, lasting anywhere from 15 to 25 episodes. And get this, while the stories were fictional, they were supposedly based on actual case files from a marriage counselor. The only people who stuck around from one case to the next were the show's host and its resident expert. What a fascinating format. Imagine that. All right, section 2, video marriage counseling. Because the whole point of this show went way beyond just entertaining people in the afternoon. It had a much, much more ambitious, and you could even say kind of presumptuous, goal in mind. In fact, the network was super careful about this. In their promotions, they never called it a soap opera. They actually came up with this official term for it: video marriage counseling. It was a very deliberate move to frame the show as a public service. You know, an educational tool to help you, the viewer, work through your own problems. And the expert they brought in to give all this on-air advice was the real deal. His name was Dr. James A. Peterson. He wasn't an actor, he was a respected associate professor of sociology at the University of Southern California. His actual day job was training graduate students to become professional marriage counselors, which gave the whole project this huge dose of authenticity. So, how did a typical episode actually play out? Well, it followed this really clear 3-part formula. First, the host, Jim Bannon, would introduce the day's conflict. Then, you'd see actors perform this dramatic scene. And finally, the show would cut back to the host, who would turn to Dr. Peterson and ask him to break down what we all just watched. This blend of drama and diagnosis really stands out. So, you've got this wild concept. You've got a real academic on board. But here's the million-dollar question. Was it actually any good? Let's take a look at what the critics had to say. In Section 3, the critics' verdict. Well, the reviews were not good at all. The critics were just not buying the whole educational angle. One writer for Newsday completely dismissed it, calling it a pseudoscientific soap opera and ultimately pat by any name. Ouch. And ironically, some critics thought that the show's mission to be educational actually made it a worse drama. A reviewer pointed out that the writing felt really forced, like the scenes were just these clumsy setups for whatever point Dr. Peterson was going to make at the end of the episode. But maybe the most savage takedown came from columnist Harriet Van Horn. She wrote that every point was made 3 times and then reviewed for the hard of hearing. So yeah, the attempt to be educational just came across as super repetitive and condescending. In today's world, that kind of approach is hard to picture. Okay, moving on to Section 4, 1 season and done. With reviews like that, you can probably guess that this story doesn't have a very happy ending. But here's a crazy fact. Despite the terrible reviews and its very short life, this show was an absolute production machine. Because it aired 5 days a week, they managed to crank out a staggering 268 episodes in just a single season. But even that frantic pace couldn't save it. The show premiered on June 29, 1959, and its final episode aired almost exactly 1 year later, on June 24, 1960. After just 1 season, it was gone for good. And you can tell how high CBS's hopes were just by looking at its time slot. It was on at 2 p.m., sandwiched right between 2 of the biggest daytime shows of the era, As the World Turns and Art Linkletter's House Party. The network gave it a golden opportunity, but it just couldn't hold on to that huge audience. So this all brings us to the final big question. Was For Better or Worse just a failed experiment, a pseudoscientific soap opera that was doomed from the start? Or, when you think about the decades of reality TV and televised therapy that followed, was this show simply an idea that was way, way ahead of its time? I'd love to know what you think. Was it a total flop or a visionary concept? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this look into some weird and forgotten TV history, please give this a like and subscribe for more deep dives. Thanks for watching.